They called her the Ghost Bride. For 3 years, Seraphine Ashford had lived in the obsidian palace of the Bloodmorn dynasty, married to the most powerful alpha on the continent. She had never once shared his bed. She had never once sat beside him at a feast. She had never once heard him speak her name without disgust dripping from every syllable. She was an Omega bound to an Alpha King who would rather watch her starve than acknowledge her existence. But they didn't know what lived inside her. They didn't know that her weakness was a mask. They didn't know that her silence was a cage holding back something ancient, something hungry. When the assassin's blade comes for King Calyx Bloodmorn, Seraphine will make a choice that changes everything. And when the dust settles, the Alpha King will learn a terrible truth. The woman he despised is the only thing standing between him and annihilation. Get ready, because the Ghost Bride is about to burn his kingdom to the ground. The servants' corridor smelled of mildew and old stone. Seraphine pressed her back against the damp wall, holding her breath as footsteps echoed past the hidden doorway. She counted to 30 before exhaling, her fingers trembling around the heel of stale bread she had stolen from the kitchen scraps. 3 years. 3 years of hiding in the walls of her own home like a rat. She was 22 now. She had been 19 when her father, the alpha of the small Ashford territory, had sold her to King Calyx in exchange for military protection against the northern raiders. A political marriage, they called it. A sacrifice for the greater good. Nobody told her that the king would take one look at her, scent her Omega blood, and declare her unfit to breathe the same air as him. Seraphine bit into the bread. It was hard enough to crack teeth, but she had learned to soften it with saliva, to chew slowly, to make each bite last. The palace kitchens threw away more food in a day than her childhood pack ate in a month. Yet here she was, fighting the dogs for scraps. She made her way through the passage, her bare feet silent on the cold stone. The servants' quarters were in the east wing, far from the royal chambers, but Seraphine didn't sleep there. The head housekeeper, a cruel beta woman named Orena, had made it clear on the first day that the king's unwanted bride would receive no special treatment. So Seraphine slept in a storage closet beneath the north tower. It was barely large enough to lie down in, filled with broken furniture and moth-eaten tapestries. But it had a lock on the inside, and in this palace, privacy was worth more than gold. She reached the closet and slipped inside, sliding the bolt home. Only then did she allow herself to sink onto the pile of old curtains that served as her bed. Her body ached. She had spent 14 hours scrubbing the Great Hall in preparation for tomorrow's summit. The kings and alphas of the 7 territories were arriving to discuss the growing threat from the eastern wildlands. It was the most important political gathering in a decade. Seraphine would not be attending. She would be here, in her closet, pretending she didn't exist. A bitter laugh escaped her cracked lips. She was the queen of the Bloodmorn dynasty. She wore the mating mark on her neck, a scar that Calyx had given her during the forced bonding ceremony, biting her with such violence that she had passed out from the pain. By every law of their kind, she was his equal. But Calyx had never completed the bond. He had marked her, claimed her legally, and then walked away. The bond was one-sided, incomplete. She could feel him sometimes, a cold presence at the edge of her consciousness, like standing next to a frozen lake. He felt nothing of her. She touched the scar on her neck. It had healed badly, ridged and ugly. A permanent reminder of her humiliation. A knock on the closet door made her jolt upright. Nobody knocked. Nobody knew she was here. The knock came again. 3 sharp raps. Seraphine grabbed a broken chair leg, the closest thing she had to a weapon. She pressed herself against the wall beside the door. The voice that came through the wood was low and feminine. "I know you're in there, Ghost Bride. Open up. I have a proposition." Seraphine's blood ran cold. She recognized that voice. Velith Seren, The king's mistress. The woman who should have been queen. Seraphine didn't move. Valeth was dangerous. She was a highborn alpha female from one of the most powerful families in the realm. She was everything Seraphine was not. Tall, commanding, beautiful in a sharp and predatory way. She had been Calix's lover for years before the political marriage, and she had made no secret of her hatred for the Omega who had technically stolen her position. 3 times in the past year, Seraphine had nearly died. A loose stone on a staircase, spoiled meat in her food, a window left open during a winter storm while she slept. She could never prove Valeth was responsible, but she knew. "I'm not here to hurt you," Valeth said, her voice dripping with impatience. "If I wanted you dead, you would already be rotting in the catacombs. Open the door. What I have to say benefits us both." Seraphine tightened her grip on the chair leg. Against every instinct screaming at her to stay hidden, she reached for the bolt. Valeth swept into the closet like she owned it, wrinkling her nose at the smell. "So, this is where you've been hiding." Pathetic. Her jade-green eyes scanned the cramped space with open contempt. "I expected more from the daughter of an alpha, even a minor one." Seraphine kept the chair leg raised. "What do you want?" Valeth smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. "I want to help you escape." The words hung in the stale air between them. "Why?" Seraphine asked. "Because you're an eyesore. Because every time I look at that ugly mark on your neck, I'm reminded that my future was stolen by a whimpering Omega who can't even shift." Valeth stepped closer, her alpha presence pushing against Seraphine's senses like a physical weight. "Because I want Calix to myself, and I can't have that while you're still technically his wife." Seraphine lowered the chair leg slightly. "If I leave, I become a rogue. The other territories won't take me. I'll be hunted. I've arranged passage to the human lands. New identity. Enough gold to start fresh. You'll never have to see another wolf as long as you live." Valeth pulled a small pouch from her cloak and tossed it onto the pile of curtains. It clinked heavily. "Take it. Leave tonight, during the chaos of the summit preparations. No one will notice you're gone until morning." Seraphine stared at the pouch. Freedom. A life without hiding, without hunger, without the constant ache of the broken bond gnawing at her chest. She should take it. She should run. But something stopped her. A stubborn flame buried so deep she had almost forgotten it existed. "No." Valeth's smile vanished. "Excuse me?" "I said no." Seraphine straightened her spine. "I am the queen of the Bloodmorn dynasty. I didn't choose this, but it's mine. I won't abandon it because you want my husband's bed to yourself." Valeth's eyes flickered with something dark. "You'll regret this, little ghost." She turned and swept out of the closet, leaving the gold behind. Seraphine stared at the pouch for a long time, her heart pounding. What had she just done? The summit began at sundown. Seraphine watched from behind a pillar in the servants' gallery, hidden in the shadows above the great hall. She shouldn't be here. If anyone spotted her, Orenna would have her whipped. But she couldn't stay away. The great hall was magnificent. 1,000 candles blazed in iron chandeliers, casting golden light across tapestries that depicted the Bloodmorn victories. Long tables groaned under platters of roasted meat, honeyed fruits, and wine dark as blood. The air was thick with the scent of power, alpha pheromones mingling in a silent battle for dominance. And at the head of the room, on a throne of black iron, sat King Calix Bloodmorn. Seraphine's breath caught despite herself. He was monstrous in his beauty. Ink-black hair fell past his shoulders, framing a face carved from cold marble. His eyes were the pale blue of glacial ice, and they held the same warmth. A jagged scar ran from his left temple to his jaw, a souvenir from the war that had made him legend. He wore black leather and silver chains, and he surveyed his guests with the lazy attention of a predator who knew nothing in the room could threaten him. Seraphine hated him. She hated the way her pulse quickened when she looked at him. She hated the way the incomplete bond pulled at her chest, begging her to go to him, to submit, to please him. She hated that some foolish part of her still hoped he might one day look at her with something other than revulsion. Valeth sat beside him, radiant in crimson silk, her hand resting possessively on his arm. She was playing the role of queen, and no one in the room seemed to find it strange. Seraphine dug her nails into her palms. The visiting alphas took their seats. She recognized some of them from her father's descriptions. Thandrick of the Iron Veil, a warrior with a braided beard. Lysara of the Dusk Hollow, the only female alpha to rule a territory in her own right. And others whose names she had forgotten. The negotiations droned on. Trade agreements, border disputes, and military alliances. Seraphine struggled to follow the political maneuvering, but her attention kept drifting back to Calyx. Then Valeth stood up. "Before we continue," Valeth announced, her voice carrying across the hall, "there is a matter of honor that must be addressed." She smiled sweetly. "It has come to my attention that we have an uninvited guest, a spy, lurking in the servants' gallery." Seraphine's blood turned to ice. Valeth raised her hand and pointed directly at the pillar where Seraphine was hiding. "Guards, bring down the king's wife. Let her explain why she's skulking in the shadows like a thief instead of sitting where she belongs." Every head in the great hall turned upward. Seraphine had nowhere to run. Two guards grabbed her arms and dragged her down the stairs, through the parting crowd, and threw her onto the stone floor at Calyx's feet. She landed hard, her palms scraping against the cold ground. 500 pairs of eyes bore into her. She looked up. Calyx was staring at her with pure, undisguised hatred. The silence in the great hall was suffocating. Seraphine pushed herself up onto her knees, her palms burning from the rough stone. She could feel the weight of every stare, the judgment of every alpha in the room pressing down on her like a physical force. Calyx rose from his throne. He descended the steps slowly, deliberately, each footfall echoing like a death knell. He stopped 3 feet from where she knelt, towering over her, his icy blue eyes empty of anything resembling mercy. "So," he said, his voice cutting through the hall like a blade, "the ghost decides to haunt us after all." Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. Seraphine kept her head down, her hair falling across her face like a curtain. "Look at me." The command was laced with alpha authority. Her body obeyed before her mind could resist, her chin lifting, her eyes meeting his. Calyx studied her face as if examining an insect. 3 years I've tolerated your presence in my palace. 3 years I've fed you, housed you, allowed you to carry my mark." His lip curled. "And this is how you repay me? By spying on a summit that could determine the fate of our kind?" "I wasn't spying," Seraphine whispered. "I only wanted to watch." "Watch?" Calyx laughed, a cold and hollow sound. "Watch what? How real wolves conduct business. How alphas with actual power shape the world." He turned to address the visiting dignitaries, spreading his arms wide. "Honored guests, allow me to introduce my wife, Seraphine of the Ashford line, an omega so weak she cannot even shift, a mate so defective that the bond refuses to complete." Murmurs swept through the crowd. Seraphine felt heat crawling up her neck, shame burning in her chest. "I was saddled with her as part of a treaty," Calyx continued, pacing around her in a slow circle. "Her father sold her to me like livestock, and I, fool that I was, accepted. I thought perhaps she might have some use, a broodmare, if nothing else." He stopped in front of her, looking down with theatrical disappointment. "But she cannot even manage that. 3 years, and her womb remains as barren as her wolf." Tears blurred Seraphine's vision. She bit the inside of her cheek until she tasted blood, refusing to let them fall. Valith descended from the dais, her crimson gown trailing behind her. She placed a possessive hand on Calix's arm and smiled down at Seraphine with poisonous sweetness. "Perhaps we should put the poor creature out of her misery," Valith suggested. "Annul the bond, send her back to her father in disgrace, or better yet, to the rogue lands where broken omegas belong." Calix appeared to consider this. Then he shook his head. "No. An annulment would require acknowledging she was ever truly my mate." He reached down and gripped Seraphine's chin, forcing her to look at him. His touch was ice cold, and she felt nothing through the bond. Nothing but emptiness. She will remain what she has always been. A ghost. A shadow. A reminder to all the lesser packs of what happens when they try to climb above their station. He released her chin with a shove that sent her sprawling backward. "Get her out of my sight," Calix commanded. "Lock her in the East Tower until the summit concludes. I won't have her embarrassing me further." Guards hauled Seraphine to her feet. As they dragged her toward the doors, she heard Valith's laughter ringing out, and the crowd's murmurs resuming their idle chatter. She was nothing to them. Less than nothing. The great doors slammed shut behind her, and the darkness swallowed her whole. The East Tower was reserved for prisoners of war. Seraphine sat in the corner of a stone cell, her arms wrapped around her knees, shivering against the bitter cold. There was no bed, no blanket, and no window. Just 4 walls and a rusted iron door. She had stopped crying hours ago. There were no tears left. The humiliation played on an endless loop in her mind. Calix's voice, dripping with contempt. Valith's triumphant smile. The sound of laughter from wolves who didn't even know her name. She had endured so much. The starvation, the isolation, the constant degradation. She had told herself that survival was enough, that if she kept her head down, stayed invisible, she might somehow outlast the hatred. But tonight had shattered that illusion. She would never be more than a ghost to them, a joke, a cautionary tale. Something cracked inside her chest. At first, she thought it was her heart breaking. Then she realized it was something else entirely. Heat bloomed in her core, spreading outward through her veins like molten silver. Her skin prickled, then burned. She gasped, clutching her stomach as a searing pain ripped through her spine. "What is happening to me?" a voice answered. It came from inside her own mind, ancient and feminine, resonant with power she had never felt before. "You have suffered enough, child. The cage is breaking." Seraphine screamed. Her bones began to shift beneath her skin, cracking and reforming in ways that shouldn't be possible. She had never shifted before. She had been told she couldn't, that her wolf was dead, or never existed at all. But something was emerging now. Something that had been locked away for 22 years, suppressed by a seal she hadn't known existed. The pain was blinding. She collapsed onto the stone floor, her body contorting, her screams turning into something deeper, more primal. "Let go," the voice commanded. "Stop fighting. Become what you were born to be." Seraphine stopped struggling. The transformation tore through her like wildfire. Her bones elongated, her muscles thickened, silver-white fur erupted from her skin. Her jaw stretched into a muzzle filled with fangs that gleamed like moonlight. When it was over, she stood on 4 paws. She was immense, far larger than any wolf she had ever seen, her shoulder height nearly 6 feet. Her fur was the color of liquid mercury, shimmering with an inner luminescence. Her eyes, reflected in the polished surface of the iron door, burned with golden fire. The voice spoke again, satisfied. "I am Lunara. I am the wolf they tried to bury, and we are done being silent." Seraphine, no, Lunara, turned toward the door. The iron that had seemed so imposing moments ago now looked fragile as paper. She drew back her colossal paw and struck. The door didn't just open. It exploded outward, ripping from its hinges, sailing down the spiral staircase and crashing against the stone walls with a thunderous boom. Alarms began to wail throughout the palace. Lunara descended the tower, her claws gouging trenches in the ancient stone. Guards appeared at the base of the stairs, swords drawn, and then immediately stumbled backward, and their faces white with terror. She didn't attack them. She simply walked past, her aura radiating such overwhelming dominance that they dropped to their knees involuntarily, whimpering like pups. The Great Hall was only 100 yards away. She could smell them all. The alphas, the dignitaries, Valith's cloying perfume, and beneath it all, the cold winter scent of Calyx, her mate, her tormentor. Lunara broke into a run. The doors of the great hall loomed ahead, reinforced oak bound with iron. She didn't slow down. The doors of the great hall exploded inward. Shards of oak and twisted iron scattered across the polished floor like shrapnel. Screams erupted from the crowd as dignitaries scrambled backward, knocking over chairs and spilling wine in their panic. Through the debris, a beast emerged. The silver wolf stepped into the candlelight, and the world seemed to hold its breath. She was enormous, her pelt blazing like moonfire, her golden eyes sweeping across the room with ancient, terrible intelligence. Calyx stood frozen at the base of his throne, his face drained of all color. His nostrils flared, catching a scent that shouldn't exist. Milk and starlight. The scent of his mate, transformed beyond recognition. Impossible, he breathed. The wolf's gaze locked onto him. A growl rumbled from her chest, so deep and resonant that the chandeliers trembled overhead and wine rippled in the goblets. Every omega and beta in the room collapsed to their knees, driven down by the sheer weight of her dominance. Even the visiting alphas staggered, their wolves recognizing a superior predator. Valith screamed, cowering behind an overturned table. "Kill it! Someone kill that monster!" But no one moved. No one could. Calyx's hand went to the sword at his hip. His own wolf was howling inside him, torn between the urge to fight and the desperate instinct to submit. He had never felt anything like this. He was the most powerful alpha on the continent, and yet his knees were shaking. The silver wolf stalked toward him, each step cracking the marble beneath her paws. She stopped 6 feet away, close enough that he could see the individual strands of her luminescent fur, the ancient fury burning in her golden eyes. She opened her jaws. A roar erupted from her throat. Not a howl, not a growl. A roar that shattered every window in the great hall, sent glass raining down like deadly snow, and knocked Calyx backward against his throne. "I am here," the roar seemed to say, "and you will never ignore me again." Then, from the shattered doorway, a slow clapping began. The wolf spun, her hackles rising. A figure stepped through the debris, calm and unhurried, as if walking into a war zone was merely a mild inconvenience. He was tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in a traveling cloak of deep charcoal. His hair was silver gray, worn long and tied back, and his face bore the weathered handsomeness of a man who had seen too many battles to count. But it was his eyes that commanded attention, amber gold, glowing faintly with their own inner light, the mark of the imperial bloodline, the mark of the High King. "Well," the stranger said, his voice carrying effortlessly across the ruined hall. "I came expecting tedious politics. This is a far more interesting development." Calyx found his voice. "High King Domeric, we weren't expecting you until tomorrow." Clearly, Domeric's gaze never left the silver wolf. He walked toward her slowly, his hands open at his sides, showing he meant no threat. Unlike everyone else in the room, he showed no fear. If anything, he looked fascinated. "Do you know what you are, little one?" he asked softly, stopping a few feet from her towering form. The wolf growled, uncertain. "I've spent 40 years searching," Domeric continued, Chasing legends and whispers, the Lunaris bloodline, they called it. Silver wolves, born once in 1,000 years, blessed by the moon goddess herself. He shook his head slowly, wonder creeping into his ancient eyes. I had given up hope. He lowered himself to one knee before her. The entire hall gasped. The High King, ruler of all 7 territories, was kneeling before the beast they had just tried to destroy. "Your Majesty," Domeric said, bowing his head, "I am at your service." Calix's shock curdled into something darker. "What is the meaning of this? That creature is my wife. She belongs to me." Domeric rose slowly and turned to face him. His expression was calm, but his eyes held a warning sharper than any blade. "Belonged," Domeric corrected. Past tense. "You just spent the last 3 years trying to destroy a living goddess." He smiled, cold and thin. "And now, King Calix, you will answer for it." Seraphine woke in a bed softer than clouds. For a moment she thought she was dreaming. The mattress beneath her was filled with down, the sheets woven from silk so fine it felt like water against her skin. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating a chamber larger than the entire servants' quarters of the Bloodmorn Palace. She sat up too quickly and winced. Every muscle in her body screamed in protest, the aftermath of a transformation her bones had never experienced before. "Easy." A deep voice came from across the room. "Your bones are still knitting together." High King Domeric sat in a velvet armchair near the fireplace, a leather-bound book open in his lap. He had changed from his traveling clothes into a simple white tunic and dark trousers. Without the formal cloak, he looked less like a monarch and more like a warrior at rest. Seraphine pulled the blankets up to her chin, suddenly aware that she was wearing nothing but a thin sleeping gown. "Where am I?" "My traveling estate, 3 hours north of Bloodmorn territory." Domeric closed his book and set it aside. "You've been unconscious for 2 days. I had my physicians examine you. The wolfsbane poisoning in your system was severe." Seraphine's breath caught. "Wolfsbane? Someone has been feeding it to you for years. Small doses, carefully measured to suppress your wolf without killing you outright." Domeric's amber eyes darkened with controlled fury. "A few more months, and the damage would have been permanent. Your wolf would have died inside you, and you never would have known she existed." The room seemed to tilt. Seraphine gripped the sheets, her knuckles white. "Who?" "I have my suspicions, but no proof yet." Domeric rose and walked to the window, gazing out at the snow-capped mountains beyond. "What I do know is that someone wanted to keep you weak. Someone who understood what you truly are." "And what am I?" Seraphine asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been told my whole life that I was broken, defective, that my wolf was dead." Domeric turned to face her. "You are the last of the Lunaris line, the Silver Wolves. Your ancestors ruled our kind 3,000 years ago, before the 7 territories existed, before the Alphas carved up the land into petty kingdoms." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "You are not defective, Seraphine. You are royalty, the purest bloodline our species has ever produced." Seraphine shook her head. "That's impossible. My mother was human. My father was a minor alpha from a territory so small it doesn't even appear on most maps." "Your father was not Aldrich Ashford." Domeric reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object. He crossed the room and placed it in her palm. It was a ring, silver, worn with age, engraved with a crescent moon wrapped around a 7-pointed star. "This was found among your mother's possessions after she died," Domeric explained. "I've been tracking it for 15 years. It's the signet ring of the Lunaris High Priestess, the last one to exist before the bloodline went into hiding." Seraphine stared at the ring. "My mother was the High Priestess?" "Your mother was the daughter of the High Priestess. She fled when the purges began, hid among humans, Fell in love with a minor alpha who asked no questions. Domeric's voice softened. She died protecting you, Seraphine. She knew what you were. She placed the seal on your wolf herself, hoping to keep you hidden until you were strong enough to survive. Tears streamed down Seraphine's cheeks. Her entire life had been a lie. The weakness, the shame, the endless torment. All of it manufactured to keep her invisible. Why? She choked out. Why would anyone want to destroy us? Domeric's expression hardened. Because a silver wolf can do something no other wolf can. She can break the blood bond of any alpha. She can free every omega in existence. He met her eyes with deadly seriousness. You are not just a queen, Seraphine. You are a revolution. Seraphine stood on the balcony of Domeric's estate, watching the sun sink behind the mountains. The ring felt heavy on her finger. She had put it on an hour ago and hadn't been able to remove it since. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her. Behind her the door opened. Domeric stepped out, 2 goblets of mulled wine in his hands. He offered one to her, and she took it without looking away from the horizon. I can offer you an alternative, Domeric said quietly. A new identity. A home in the eastern provinces where no one knows your face. You could live peacefully, anonymously. The choice is yours. Seraphine sipped the wine. It was warm and spiced, chasing away the mountain chill. And if I stay, then I train you. I teach you to control the power inside you, to wield it instead of being consumed by it. Domeric leaned against the railing beside her. But I won't lie to you. The path is dangerous. The wolves who purged your bloodline still exist. They call themselves the Ashen Circle. And when they learn you've awakened, they will come for you. And Calyx? Domeric's jaw tightened. The bond between you is technically unbroken. He marked you, which gives him a legal claim. He's already sent 3 messengers demanding your return, calling it kidnapping. Seraphine laughed bitterly. Kidnapping. He locked me in a tower. The law doesn't care about towers, it cares about marks. Domeric set his goblet on the railing. If you want to be free of him permanently, there's only one way. You have to challenge the bond, force him to face you as an equal, and break it on your own terms. Seraphine closed her eyes. She thought of the storage closet, the stale bread, the years of silence and shadow. She thought of Valeth's cruel laughter and Calyx's empty eyes. Then she thought of Lunara, the wolf inside her, ancient and powerful and finally awake. What do you want? She asked silently. The answer came like thunder. I want them to kneel. Seraphine opened her eyes. The violet had been replaced by flecks of molten gold. Train me, she said. Teach me how to make him regret every moment he made me feel worthless. Domeric smiled, slow and dangerous. Then we begin at dawn. 3 weeks later, Seraphine stood in the great hall of Domeric's estate. She was transformed. Not just physically, though 3 weeks of proper food, rest, and training had filled out her gaunt frame and brought color back to her pale skin. The true change was in her bearing. She stood straight, shoulders back, chin high. The hunted look had vanished from her eyes, replaced by something harder, colder, something dangerous. The towering doors swung open, and Calyx Bloodmorn strode in. He had come with a delegation of 20 warriors, all of them bristling with weapons and hostility. Valeth walked at his side, dressed in furs and velvet, her jade-green eyes scanning the hall for threats. Calyx stopped 10 feet from Seraphine. He looked her up and down, and for a moment, something flickered in his pale blue eyes. Confusion, perhaps, or recognition of something he had failed to see before. Then his lip curled into a familiar sneer. So, the ghost has been playing dress-up. He gestured at her gown, a simple but elegant silver sheath that Domeric's tailors had made for her. You think new clothes change what you are? I know exactly what I am. Seraphine replied calmly. The question is whether you're finally ready to learn. Valeth laughed shrilly. Listen to her. 3 weeks away from your rightful master and you've forgotten your place. My place is wherever I choose to stand. Seraphine didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. You came here to drag me back in chains. You won't succeed. Calix's eyes narrowed. You are my mate. The mark on your neck proves it. By the laws of our kind. By the laws of our kind. Domeric interrupted, stepping forward from his position near the throne. A marked mate may challenge an incomplete bond through trial by combat. He smiled thinly. I trust you remember your history, Calix. Or did you sleep through those lessons as a pup? Calix's face reddened. You would let her fight me? I'll kill her in seconds. Then you have nothing to fear. Silence hung heavy in the air. Seraphine could see the calculation in Calix's eyes. Refusing the challenge would make him look weak. Accepting it should guarantee his victory. An Omega against an Alpha King? The outcome was predetermined. Or so he believed. Fine. Calix growled. I accept. When she's bleeding at my feet, I'll drag her home by her hair. There's one more condition, Seraphine said. When I win, the bond is severed permanently, and Valeth faces judgment for the wolfsbane she's been putting in my food for 3 years. Valeth went pale. That's a lie. I never... We found the supplier, Domeric said mildly. He was very cooperative once we explained the alternative to cooperation. Calix turned to look at Valeth. For the first time, doubt crept into his expression. Is this true? She's manipulating you. Valeth grabbed his arm. Can't you see? This is all a trap. That Omega is poison. She's always been poison. Calix shook her off. His jaw tightened as he turned back to Seraphine. Combat, he said flatly. Tomorrow at dawn. The mountain arena. Tonight? Seraphine countered. Under the full moon, unless you need time to prepare for a fight against a defective Omega. The insult landed. Calix's hands clenched into fists. Tonight, he agreed through gritted teeth. And when this is over, you'll wish you'd stayed in that tower. He turned and stormed out, his delegation scrambling to follow. Valeth cast one last venomous glance at Seraphine, her jade-green eyes promising retribution, before disappearing through the doors. When they were gone, Domeric approached Seraphine. His expression was carefully neutral. You could have had more time to prepare. I've had 3 years to prepare. Seraphine touched the ring on her finger. Every day, in that closet. Every meal I scraped from the garbage. Every time he looked through me like I was nothing. Her eyes burned gold. I've been preparing my whole life, I just didn't know it. Domeric nodded slowly. Then let's finish your training. You have 6 hours to learn how to destroy a king. Seraphine smiled. It was not a gentle expression. I only need 5. The mountain arena was ancient. Carved into the living rock 10,000 years ago, it was a perfect circle of stone surrounded by tiered seating that rose toward the stars. Torches blazed along the perimeter, their flames dancing in the wind. Above, the full moon hung fat and silver, bathing everything in pale light. Seraphine stood on the northern edge of the arena, barefoot, wearing a simple fighting tunic. The cold stone beneath her feet grounded her, connecting her to the earth, to her wolf, to the power thrumming through her veins. Across the circle, Calix stripped off his shirt, revealing a torso covered in battle scars. He rolled his shoulders, cracked his neck, and fixed her with a predatory grin. Last chance to surrender, he called out. Yield now, and I might show mercy. You don't know what mercy means, Seraphine replied. The referee, one of Domeric's trusted elders, raised his hand. The challenge is issued and accepted. Combat ends upon yield, unconsciousness, or death. Shift is permitted. His hand dropped. Begin. Calix didn't bother shifting. He charged in human form, confident that his size and training would be enough to subdue a woman half his weight. Seraphine waited. He swung a brutal fist at her head. She ducked beneath it, feeling the wind of its passage, and drove her elbow into his exposed ribs. The crack echoed across the arena. Calyx stumbled, shock flashing across his face. That blow had carried far more force than any Omega should possess. "Lucky shot," he snarled, and lunged again. This time Seraphine didn't just dodge, she caught his wrist, pivoted, and used his own momentum to throw him over her hip. He crashed onto the stone hard enough to drive the breath from his lungs. She stepped back, waiting. Calyx rose slowly, his expression darkening from arrogance to genuine anger. "Fine. You want to play? Let's play." His shift was violent and fast. Bones cracked, muscles rippled, and in seconds an enormous black wolf stood where the man had been. He was huge, his pelt the color of midnight, his eyes burning with crimson fury. He lunged, jaws snapping for her throat. Seraphine closed her eyes. "Lunara, I'm here." Silver light exploded from her body. The transformation was smoother now, almost graceful, her human form dissolving into something far more powerful. When the light faded, the silver wolf stood in the arena. She was larger than Calyx, larger than any wolf in recorded history. Her fur blazed like captured moonlight, and her golden eyes held the weight of 3,000 years. Calyx hesitated. For the first time in his life, his wolf recognized something stronger than itself. But pride drove him forward. They collided in a storm of fur and fangs. Calyx fought with brutal experience, years of combat honed to lethal efficiency. He scored hits, a gash along her shoulder, a bite that drew blood from her flank. But Seraphine fought with something deeper. Every wound she had suffered fueled her. Every insult, every humiliation, and every tear she had swallowed in the dark. She caught his foreleg in her jaws and twisted. The bone shattered. Calyx howled, crashing onto his side. He tried to rise, but she was already on him, her heavy paw pinning his throat to the stone, her fangs hovering inches from his jugular. The arena fell absolutely silent. "Submit," she commanded through the bond, forcing the word into his mind. Calyx struggled, whimpering, his broken leg dragging uselessly. His crimson eyes rolled with terror and desperate pride. She pressed harder. Blood began to seep from beneath her claws. "Submit." The black wolf went limp. His head fell back, exposing his throat completely. A high, keening whine escaped him. Submission. Seraphine held him there for 5 long seconds. She wanted everyone to see. She wanted it burned into their memories forever. Then she released him and stepped back, shifting into human form. She stood naked in the moonlight, her skin streaked with blood, her eyes still blazing gold. "The bond," she announced, her voice ringing across the arena, "is broken." She felt it snap inside her chest. The cold emptiness that had plagued her for 3 years vanished, replaced by a warmth that was entirely her own. She was free. The victory lasted exactly 30 seconds. A horn blast shattered the night, low and mournful, echoing off the mountain peaks. Domric's guards scrambled to attention, their hands flying to their weapons. "Perimeter breach!" someone shouted. "Eastern slope, hundreds of them!" Seraphine spun toward the arena entrance. Dark shapes were pouring over the ridgeline, moving with unnatural speed and coordination. They wore black armor etched with a symbol she had never seen before, a circle filled with ash-gray flames. "The Ashen Circle," Domric said grimly, appearing at her side with a sword already drawn. "They found us." Calyx had shifted back to human form, cradling his broken arm. Despite the pain, his face had gone pale with recognition. "Those are purifiers, elite killers. They wiped out the Morvain pack in a single night. And now they've come for the last silver wolf." Domric pressed a blade into Seraphine's hand. Can you fight? Seraphine's muscles screamed in protest. The battle with Calyx had drained her more than she wanted to admit. But the Ashen Circle soldiers were already flooding into the arena, surrounding them on all sides. Do I have a choice? The first wave hit like a black tide. Domric moved with lethal grace, his blade singing through the air, cutting down enemies with mechanical efficiency. Even Calyx, wounded and humiliated, fought with desperate ferocity, his unbroken arm tearing through Ashen soldiers. Seraphine shifted again, her silver wolf bursting forth despite the exhaustion. She was slower now, her movements heavy, but her claws still found throats, and her jaws still crushed bones. But there were too many. For every soldier that fell, 3 more took their place. They fought with fanatical determination, chanting in an ancient language, seemingly immune to pain. Then she saw him. A figure in gray robes stood at the edge of the arena, untouched by the chaos. He was ancient, his face a mask of wrinkles and ritual scars, his eyes the dead white of a blind man. But he moved with perfect awareness, raising a staff topped with a pulsating black crystal. "The abomination must die!" he shrieked. "The bloodline must end!" He slammed the staff down. A wave of dark energy rippled outward, striking every wolf in the arena. Seraphine felt it hit her like a physical blow, driving her to her knees. Her shift collapsed, her human form returning involuntarily. All around her, wolves were writhing on the ground, unable to maintain their forms. Even Domeric staggered, fighting to stay upright. "Seraphine!" he gasped. "That staff. It's a binding relic. You have to destroy it." The robed figure raised his hand, and 4 ashen soldiers grabbed Seraphine, forcing her to her knees before him. 3,000 years, the old man hissed, leaning close. 3,000 years we've hunted your kind. The silver wolves brought chaos, upset the natural order. Omegas thinking they could defy their masters. He spat at her feet. "Tonight, we finish what our ancestors started." He raised a curved dagger, the blade stained with old blood. Seraphine looked up at him, exhausted, beaten, bound, but not broken. A presence awakened in her core, not Lunara, something far older, something that had been sleeping since the first silver wolf walked beneath the moon. "They tried to end us before," a chorus of voices whispered. "They failed. They always fail." Seraphine stopped fighting the soldier's grip. She stopped struggling against the binding energy. Instead, she embraced it. The darkness flowing from the staff met the light rising from her core. They collided, merged, and then exploded. A nova of silver fire erupted from Seraphine's body. It vaporized the soldiers holding her, shattered the ancient staff into 1,000 fragments, and sent the robed figure flying backward into the stone wall with a crack that ended his screaming forever. The remaining ashen soldiers froze. Then they ran. Seraphine stood in the center of the destruction, light still radiating from her skin like a second moon had risen in the arena. Domeric stared at her with something approaching reverence. Even Calyx, broken and bleeding, gazed upon her with naked awe. She looked down at her hands. They were glowing. "What am I becoming?" she whispered. Lunara's voice answered, gentle for the first time. "Something new. Something the world has never seen." 6 months later, the world had changed. Seraphine stood on the balcony of the Crystal Citadel, the ancient seat of the Lunaris bloodline, restored after 3 millennia of ruin. Below her, thousands of wolves had gathered from every territory on the continent. Alphas, betas, omegas, all standing together in a way that would have been unthinkable a year ago. She wore a gown of silver silk that caught the sunlight like liquid mercury. On her brow sat a crown of woven moonstone and starlight. On her finger, the ring of the high priestess gleamed. Behind her, Domeric stepped forward. He had refused any title, any position, content to serve as her advisor and protector. but she saw the pride in his amber eyes. "They're waiting," he said quietly. Seraphine nodded and stepped to the railing. 6 months ago, she called out, her voice carrying across the crowd through ancient acoustics. "I was sleeping in a closet, eating scraps, wondering if I would survive another day. I was told I was broken, defective, worthless." She paused, letting the silence stretch. They were wrong. A roar of approval erupted from the crowd. "The old ways taught us that omegas were weak, that our only value was in submission. The old ways were lies, designed to keep us controlled, to keep us afraid." Her eyes burned gold. "No more. From this day forward, no omega in any territory will be bonded against their will. No wolf will be poisoned or suppressed or hidden away. The blood hierarchies are broken." She raised her hand and the crowd fell silent. "I am Seraphine of the Lunaris line, the silver wolf reborn, and I declare a new era." The cheering was deafening. In the crowd below, Seraphine spotted a familiar figure. Calyx Bloodmorn stood at the edge of the gathering, his broken arm long healed, his face unreadable. He had surrendered his territory rather than face trial for his crimes. Now he was just another wolf, stripped of title and power. Their eyes met. He bowed his head. A true bow, not the mockery of respect he had shown before. Seraphine felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, just the quiet peace of someone who had finally let go. Nearby, in the crowd's lowest section, Velith Sorene stood in the gray robes of the disgraced, her noble titles stripped, her family estates seized. She would spend the rest of her days serving the omegas she had once tormented. A fitting end for a poisoner. Beside Seraphine, Domeric's hand brushed against hers. A question, unspoken. She took it. The crowd erupted again as they saw it. The High King and the Silver Queen, hands intertwined. A new bond, chosen freely, forged in fire. Seraphine smiled, and for the first time in her life, it reached her eyes. The ghost bride was gone. The queen had risen. If you enjoyed this story and want more shifter romances, enemies to lovers drama, and fantasy revenge tales, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.